All right, thank you everybody for coming back. I know you had the opportunity to walk around a little bit. I want to hype up this session because what we heard from the public sector folks is in this moment, what is going to be critical are going to be the partnerships, the relationships, and a reimagining of what is possible. And I am so excited to be part of this panel because we're going to bring it home around how all those things have been coming together over the last couple of years, even decades. But before I do that, I want to ground us a little bit in a lot of what we've talked about has been what some of the possibilities are, but we've not really taken a moment to talk about in this moment, what you are seeing is history coming together in a way that holds the collective power that communities have been putting forward in order to self-determine. I don't want us to walk away from that lightly. A lot of the conversations has been around like the financing pieces, and for me that's abstract. The reality is that low wealth communities, Black and brown communities, have never had the ability to self-determine. They have been put upon, when we talk about infrastructure investments, they have been put upon. And along the lines of race and class, they are the ones who have held the burden for our progress, for our growth. In this moment, we have the ability to be creative and reimagine how communities are at the center of that and why they need to be at the center of that. For me, a girl who grew up in the EJ community in Brooklyn, this is my moment, our moment, to realize what is possible for our communities. Communities have been building the collective power for centuries. The thing that we have never been given has been a seat at the table or the opportunity to redefine what it means for us to put our power forward and define what we need for our communities. This federal opportunity gives us that. As Stephanie said earlier, we now have resources on the table. But the thing is, we also have process and systems that are forcing us, mandating the folks with money to actually see communities for who they are. And it is important in this moment when we talk about, and we're going to get into community as developer, why that is important. Infrastructure has been the primary thing to build wealth in this country, to define whether or not communities will prosper or be in an EJ community. So when we talk about community as developer, it is important because it gives us the ability to define and own not just that asset, but the process by which we will self-determine what happens in our communities. I am so excited to be able to bring this panel together. I've been working with most of these people for close to a decade. Some newer, but close to a decade. So prior to launching this endeavor with Communities First, I was at the Cerner Foundation, I was with WEAC, I was with NRDC. All of those were stepping stones for this moment. We have created collectively from the ground up a space where we are saying what communities need and how they need it. And many of these folks have been architects in helping to create the enabling conditions. So whether it is Shiva Patel, who now is with DC Green Bank, but prior to that, he was working within communities, helping them to put forward a vision of what is possible and navigate that. Shiva will be talking about sort of the balance between like the market and what the realities are from the community level. Then we have Bracken. Bracken will be talking about like the underwriting that's necessary. Through Working Power, he has been stepping into how do we actually underwrite these projects and reimagine and right-size what scale is. Scale is not the same. So the feds love, and philanthropy, love to talk about scale. Scale is always this abstract thing of like $100 million project. Can we, again, let's sit in the fact that communities have systematically been disinvested in for centuries. So we're not gonna go to 0 to 100 million. So Bracken's gonna talk about like, what does it mean to underwrite that and reimagine what scale actually needs to be if we are all going to benefit from these dollars. Then we have Rahwa. Rahwa, we go way back. So when we talk about community as developer, Rahwa led the work within Buffalo with an organization called Push Buffalo. So it started with an idea of like maybe we can just get this school, we can figure out how to retrofit the school. Wait, no. What does it look like for us to actually develop our neighborhoods and define what it will be? And she will talk about what the journey has been, but also how challenging has been, but what was created. Strong workforce development, strong ownership around assets, and the possibilities of this moment to be able to get it to scale. It was one of the few places in Buffalo to be able to do that. And then last, we have Sarah. Sarah and I, another one, go way back. Sarah is with the McKnight Foundation. But Sarah and I have been ride or die within the philanthropic space. And she, along with many other funders, have actually put skin in the game and taken their proper place with frontline movement folks and with communities to be able to step back and be, what do you need to be able to self-determine? So whether it was the last organization she was with in the New England area, I'll just leave it that way, where she was resourcing folks to where she is now with McKnight, where she is using the full endowment to be able to invest in communities in a way that communities have power and ownership. So I bring together my squad, and I'm gonna start with Shiva. All right.
All right, thank you so much, Helen. Really appreciate it. Great to see so many familiar faces, also new faces. I really appreciate the discussion so far. I think we're all going to be building off of each other, and there'll be some common themes, but I'll share a perspective, from starting my career much more on the community side, and now transitioning to working at the DC Green Bank. What does that balance look like? And I think for me, 12 years ago, when I started Energy Solidarity Cooperative, a worker-owned cooperative focused on community-based solar projects, we really, and this was in the Bay Area in California, right, we were seeing how solar was really sort of taking off, right, in sort of a more of a mainstream way in terms of, some large corporations coming around, a lot of wealthy individuals, right, who were initially allowed to benefit. And it was happening, right, it was happening pretty rapidly. And at the same time, it was clear to see, where this deployment was happening, right, and what communities were getting left out. And so we were really interested in really understanding why and building an alternative process and model, that can really fill those gaps. And it took, a good few years of work, deep in relationship with community, being very intentional to really understand and build an alternative solution there. And what we found was, really the whole process of, project development from beginning to end really lacked, authentic community engagement and involvement. And so we really set out to have local community organizations, EJ groups, to be involved in the planning process at the beginning. Where do we even want these projects? What do we want them to look like? And then really involving residents and youth as well, sort of in that process, and allowing them to benefit, right, from the workforce development, the apprenticeship program type of opportunities, and to, within the design of the project. And as we were moving through that, right, other obstacles and opportunities were also coming up. And that was really around, who is owning these projects, right? And we've heard, and I'm so grateful to hear from Treasury, right, there's a special allocation, as Anisha was talking about, for worker-owned cooperatives. And to see that in Treasury language now, right, is pretty incredible. And to also see, right, how many worker-owned co-ops have actually grown over the past decade doing this work. And so within that model, not only were we looking at how do communities own that project, but us as a worker-owned cooperative, right, how are we sharing our equity and the ownership in the enterprise with the community? So at both levels, really involving community. So right, it was really about the process, the financing, the ownership. And back then, 12 years ago, right, we're definitely in a much different place now, but really we came up across the issues of just accessing financing that works for us, right, and for that model, for those types of projects, right? And I guess one theme I just want to hit on is the importance of actually meeting communities where they're at, right, and understanding the reality on the ground. We have a lot of money coming in from GGRF and other sources, and at the same time, a lot of work needs to be done and a lot of funding needs to be put down to make sure that the right types of projects are actually able to move forward. And I think that's going to take a lot of intentionality on behalf of financial institutions, some creativity. Right? We're going to need, as we've heard about, pre-development funding, technical assistance, capacity building, and I really hope that particularly financial institutions in the room, right, that we recognize that yes, there's a huge rush or urgency to deploy funds, but at the same time, right, we need to do the work to be intentional and to recognize that we cannot leave communities behind, and particular communities that have been left out of the transition thus far, and we need to do it differently, right? It's not just necessarily about energy bill savings, but that's a big part of it, right? But how are we also integrating workforce development? How are we also integrating resilience, battery storage? How are we also focusing on the reality that a lot of buildings in certain communities, right, need those enabling upgrades or roof replacements, and we're not going to be able to do all the clean energy projects, right, in those communities if we can't address that as sort of an underlying factor, underlying need. And so, where is that funding going to come from, and where is that patience? And again, using this word a lot, intentionality, right, particularly on the financial partner side, because there's a lot of projects, there's a lot of things that need to get done. And I think it's on us in many ways to really understand and meet the local community where they're at, build those relationships, and build and tailor those financial products, right, according to what we're hearing, and bringing in the community and community organizations as part of that process as we're designing our financial products, as we're moving through the lending process, and particularly with direct pay. And I'll end here, but I think obviously we're going to have this huge ability to deploy a new model of ownership within the clean energy space and allow tax-exempt organizations to actually retain ownership of these projects. And whether that be directly or whether that be tax-exempt institutions like the green banks, right, who could play that role, who could hold ownership, help develop the project at the beginning, and have a plan to transfer ownership, right, completely over to a community organization over time. I think that's going to be a really important opportunity, and I hope that we sort of dig deep in there and leverage that. And again, moving and keeping community at sort of as our North Star, right? To achieve any of these outcomes, all the meaningful benefits that EPA has laid out, we've got to understand sort of why we're doing this and who should be sort of leading the way. And those of us who are in sort of other positions to partner, provide the capital, right, being able to really follow that lead and be willing to listen, to learn, to change our strategy when we need to have those difficult conversations, to get that internal buy-in, and to continue to push ourselves to do what we need to.
Thank you so much for that. Bracken, tell us a little bit about what it takes to move these projects from a thought to reality.
Great. And to frame up that conversation about what it takes to move from thought to reality, I just want to bring in two pieces from the earlier program that seem especially important about how we manifest new economic structures. I, first of all, really want to appreciate Benny and Stephanie opening by calling on us as creative people, bringing our ancestors into the room, and thinking about what it means to build, and to build creatively. And there was something Benny said that I just wanted to remind us of, which is a skill set about sitting with anxiety. Because we're at a moment where we're building something that doesn't yet exist, but needs to exist. And if it doesn't come to exist, we will all suffer and be impoverished by it. And we know that when that happens, issues of power and distribution of wealth and assets matter tremendously in terms of who bears that pain. So this is critically important, that we think as designers, as creative people, even when we're dealing with legal document review or financial structuring or development of new federal programs or local implementation procedures. Second thing I want to call into this conversation is the exceptional group of federal leaders who we had here. This is unusual to have federal leaders come to community partners and say, we want to be humble, we want to listen, we're approaching this with gratitude, and we need to learn from you. So that's amazing. So you put these two things together, there's still something that's really quite concerning, that we should have our eyes on with laser focus, which is that question of power and speed. There's a huge pressure right now to scale, and we need to scale. The capital market needs to scale. Donors need to scale investment. We need trillion-dollar pools of capital moving into the market. And those moments are tremendously exciting, and they're also dangerous unless you really have your eyes on how we structure deals. And we know from the highway program, as the Deputy Secretary of Treasury mentioned, where those highway overpasses go, how we structure transactions. If you look at, farm loans, they really worked to fight rural poverty, but who got those loans? And the incredible loss of ownership for black farmers. Just all the way down, the GI Bill. It's a really, really deep history. So we've got $400 billion to work with. So the question is, how are we going to put that to work? And I just wanted to show a couple pictures, because I think the legal structures and the numbers matter. They're illustrations. I don't want to get bogged down in them. But sometimes you can actually tell a powerful story. This is just saying, what are the agreements we're actually dealing with? Can we get union contracts? Can we have project labor agreements? Can we have community benefits agreements with teeth so that community partners are vested? Can we lock people into direct ownership? And for the community partners in the room, that's what you need to be thinking about, is where you have contractual standing and a right to access to the dollars in the deal. And we created Working Power because my partner Ian Fisher and I had been toiling in the trenches creating community-owned projects, and we saw how easy it is to lose that deal that you've been putting together when you don't have $2 million for panel deposits. So I just wanted to show you what a legal org chart looks like in a solar deal. Solar projects are put together in a special purpose entity. It has legal standing. It owns assets. It generates revenue when it sells energy, and those dollars flow up and they pay the operating costs, and then they flow into a managing member. A special purpose entity, you create your LLC, you bring in your debt, you bring in your equity, and usually this is completely opaque to the community partners. They don't see where the dollars are flowing. They don't see how they're constructed. And the community gets some payments, but it's from a hierarchical power position. They're not hardwired in. They're receiving benefits in energy savings or cash flows. Often the contracts aren't binding. So what we're trying to do inside Working Power is to flip that relationship. So the communities are in direct ownership. They're entitled to audited financials. They know where every dollar goes. The contracts are enforceable. They're owners. That's the moment where communities are in power and when those federal dollars can be put to work. So I just wanted to show you that, and I want to think about how we all collectively, in our own little corner of this puzzle, ask for it, demand it, and build a supportive infrastructure so we can go create structures that actually work and that will last for 20, 30, 50 years to build real wealth, lasting wealth, jobs, and all the promise of what the IRA is meant to create. And I wanted to show you also, this is it's a generalized version, but it's built on a megawatt project in New York City that we're building. It's about a $3.5 million capital investment into real assets. And these are the places where community partners, they're really good at raising grant money training folks, doing good work in the community. But that $3.5 million is the point at which the community can be disintermediated and wealth can be extracted from community to financial interests outside the community. So building this, what we're trying to do is unpack that financial model and show how the community can participate as an equity investor. Things like direct pay, that's money, if it's flowing to community, that should be expressed as equity in the deal. So you get the money back and you get a return on it like any financial equity investor would. And you should be having a piece of the energy savings, so they flow to your community members. That means housing affordability in rapidly gentrifying communities. You cut the cost of housing, you help people vest themselves in that community for long term. And on an ongoing basis, our community partners know how to run things. We have durability, we're here for the long haul, so we can do operations and maintenance, job training, and we can get paid for it. So you put that together, this $3.5 million capital investment in a community, behind that, that's just a capital cost. It can be flowing to Black-owned businesses, to women-owned contractors. It can be flowing into job training programs. That $3.5 million does work on its own, but within the profits, there's $2.5 million that can flow to communities as owners. So you're creating this whole other layer of wealth building and power and community democracy and direction out of the economics that are usually opaque to the community partners. And this is just showing if you roll that up. And this is really a message to the partners in philanthropy. What we're trying to do now is scale a $50 million fund so that we can seed investment in these pools of directly community-owned deals. And from a $50 million investment from PRI, from community-based impact investments, you could lever $350 million of debt and equity from the private market to get $400 million flowing from your initial PRI. So there's just this built-in scale. And again, that's just the capital investment. So out of this $50 million investment to get a $400 million pool of assets, behind the scenes and the money that otherwise would be going to bankers and private equity funds, there's $250 million in there that is new wealth expressed in lower cost energy, new dividends, payment for services, and the rewards of ownership because at the front end you took the time to vest the partners into the deal. So that's really all I wanted to show you with these pictures. And I just wanted to say, as we think about these tools, whether it's adders for high-skilled labor, for prevailing wage jobs in the tax credits, or for serving affordable housing, or things like direct pay and transferability, or GGRF, Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund debt, these dollars are being put to work today. And it's really important, the folks in this room, we understand grassroots community economic development, we understand housing affordability. There are tools we can lean on to create direct ownership in communities, drawing on decades of tradition. We just need to think about whether it's things like cooperative ownership or land trusts. These are the vehicles that will vest power in communities. And as we unleash $400 billion, this is our chance to do it differently and to really create a lasting outcome that realizes the promises that have been made and to not allow for another round of broken promises.
Thank you for that, Bracken. And Rahwa, I would love for you to help ground us because I know a lot of people in this room, some of what they're holding is like we got some new money from the feds and we're gonna make these investments and we'll just do it the status quo way.
Yeah.
Hold that. I want y'all to know there's a mandate right now from the feds that we do it differently. And a little bit of what your guys are holding is like, well, it's not possible. It can't be done. It has been done. So you have Rahwa, who has led an amazing team over a decade and has been able to grow and show what the possibilities are of what it means for community to be developer. And it is not a one-off. We have other partners in this room, whether it is an A-Pen in the Bay Area, whether it is, I'm trying to remember who's in the room.
Ironbound.
Ironbound, thank you, in Newark. Like, it has been done, it
We've got
can be
ACE.
done. Go ahead, girl.
ACE.
AC, you see how, right? So, Rahwa, tell us about what it means to be community as developer, how it necessitates a different set of relationships, but also a grounding around who needs to be at the center of that in order to make it possible.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I just want to wake y'all up a little bit. And if I were his sidekick, Bracken is so humble. What is beautiful about their model is the community receives the return on investment day one. Not 2 years, not 3 years, not 5 years. That's the kind of critical thing that allows organizations like Push Buffalo to exist. So the question here is community as developer. Well, actually, in order for a community to be a developer, community-based organization, you have to be an innovator. We're actually innovators in our community. And I'm going to go back to what Brother said earlier about alchemy. We are strategists, and we know how to alchemize generations of colonization and the legacy of slavery, because that's what an EJ community is. So we have to work at the intersections of racial, economic, and environmental justice, because for generations, our communities have been extracted from. And many of the policies that were created intentionally to make sure that certain subsets of US citizens were left out of any benefits of generational wealth. So now we have to deal with a whole host of issues. So it's not about building affordable housing. It's not about having a land bank. It's not about land and land use. It is literally bringing people together and reminding them that they are capable, right? We always talk about we need to bring capacity to the community. No. You need to bring the resources. If you ask our community members what do they want, they will tell you because they know exactly what they want, they know exactly what's needed, because the people that are closest to the problem actually have the best solutions, right? And so we are a living example of that, and this is not new. The reason why the Communities Change Grant exists is because so many of these organizations for decades have been organizing. It is our policies that you are seeing coming to fruition, which is why we're having a very different conversation today than we did 5 years ago, than we did a decade ago, right? The alignment with government, the alignment with philanthropy, the alignment with impact investors, and the alignment with community, right? And so, but when we got started, we were told we were crazy. Excuse me. We were crazy. It'll never be done. And so you should never tell community you're crazy. It'll never be done, because some of us are just bold enough to take you up on that and show you what is possible. So, and I mean, I don't say that lightly. Buffalo is the third poorest city in America. We are the second highest, most resettled mid-sized American city, because it's cheap to bring folks there, and we've lost half of our population. We had incredible industry. At one time, we were the 6th largest economy in the US, but all that industry left polluted waters, so our fresh waters were polluted. Our housing stock beautifully architectural beauties, built to last more than 100 years, but built before insulation was ever invented, with lead and asbestos and mold. And when you take 50 to 60 years of disinvestment of old housing, you can imagine what people are living in. Unlivable housing conditions that make our people sick, that burden them. New York State pays close to 40%, low-income folks in New York State pay 40% of their income on their utilities, their gas bills. It's like literally money going out the window. We have asthma rates that are deplorable of children and our elders. So these are all the things that we are dealing with. So yes, community as developer, but we're not thinking about developing one aspect. We actually have to think holistically. It is moving out of the binary, which is the dominant narrative in this country, right? And so all these systems and all the programs, and even though they're very well-intentioned policymakers, if you are not of and from community and don't have that lived experience, you cannot design something for us. So they don't work. It's not relevant to us. We don't know how to access them, right? And so what Push Buffalo's done a really good job in the alchemy, right? We brought 400 low-income folks and said if you had 0 barriers, reimagine your neighborhood, and they reimagined it for us. So then our work was to do the research and remove all of the barriers, right? And take all of the assets and build that up. So I'm gonna fast forward for you. 17 years later, also, I am not the founder of Push. Aaron Bartley is. I'm the 2nd executive director. And in the room is Dawn Wells-Clyburn, the 3rd executive director of Push Buffalo. And none of us believe in staying in an organization more than 10 years in a leadership position because we need to show the next generation, other people that have not done this, in particular queer folks, black folks, other BIPOC folks, and people and women into these kinds of roles because we naturally think differently. We know how to address these issues from the core. So it is the people that are of and from our communities that have reimagined the blocks in Buffalo. We started with a couple of blocks, we're up to 40 blocks, and we are doing cool stuff like, A, we own the land, so we believe in community control and community ownership from day one. So we own the land. We have about 150 parcels of land. Then we ask the community, help us develop all of these properties and all of this land. And then we have been able to braid a host of resources from philanthropy, individual donations, to government funding, to and LITEC and other kinds of programs. And we're able to bring all of that together to make it work because, you know what, and we barely make any developer fees, if I'm being honest. But you know what we're able to do? Right now we're building, half of them already have come online, 50 units of affordable, supportive, for people that are dealing with mental health, addiction issues, substance abuse disorder, dealing with chronic mental health issues, are either homeless or facing homelessness. 30% of the units are for them. No fossil fuel infrastructure in this housing, none. They're all passive house build. And we include things like community benefits agreements for the people that are in our community that we are training in these sectors to be rebuilding their community. But we start small, right? We built our first net zero house as a demonstration project in 2010 using youth build students or youth and working with unions and everybody else. We had to catch up. We had to wait for the technology to catch up and become more affordable. So it wasn't until 2021 when we got funded, and we planned this during COVID years, y'all. So that's what we did. But now, and we were told it'll never be done, you're too ambitious, don't do it. We're like, nope, we got this. You know why? Because we wrote the policy that passed legislation in New York State, the CLCPA. It's, you know what, we use the model of Push Buffalo, Uprose, the Point in the South Bronx to say, this is what the community needs and wants. And as part of the implementation strategy, because we were tired of passing laws without an implementation strategy, we are in the governance at the state level, making sure that those funds are going to where they're going to. I'm just gonna share one more thing. So WEJAC, the 40%, Justice 40, is actually based on New York State's 40% of all clean energy funds, not benefits. I'm sorry y'all didn't win it, but we won it in New York. Of all clean energy funds go to what are disadvantaged communities. We use 45 different health markers and like other kinds of environmental threats. But I sit on the Climate Justice Working Group. I sit there with folks like Elizabeth Young-Pierre and Eddie Bautista and Sonal from WEAC, right? So we put ourselves again into the governance structure to ensure that the implementation will happen. So when I hear of all these amazing federal grants of IRA, it is the hard work, decades of hard work of organizations like APEN, like Just Cause, like Ironbound, like ACE, a bunch of others here in the room, and philanthropic intermediaries like the Solutions Project that have helped us get here. So to that, I say thank you, and we are not done yet, and now we're able to go to scale citywide in a very different way in my community, and that's what we hope to come back and present to you next time. Okay.
So as we think about the necessary partnerships, whether it is on the community side, the public sector, the private sector, the financial sector, what is a key actor in being the catalyst for a lot of the seeding that is necessary for these things to happen, meaning for community to be in the position and the power to reimagine, has been philanthropy, or needs to be philanthropy. Why don't I say that? Because we are not a monolith. If you met one philanthropist, you met one philanthropist. But we have folks that have centered themselves in being in right relationship with community and being allies with community. And I wanted to kick it over to Sarah to sort of lay out how McKnight is seeing this moment, how they are using their economic and their political power in order to help be the seeding and the necessary nurturing for these communities to be able to act as community developers and be able to be in the queue. So I'm sort of looking around because, again, I hold who's in this room are some of the financial entities that will ultimately get these federal funds. I want you to know when we talk about what it means for this moment to happen, we are going to, again, have to reimagine and think about how we de-risk some of those dollars so that communities can step into this moment. But philanthropy has taken that step. And Sarah would love for you to share some of those steps.
Good morning, everybody. Not to set the bar too high, right?
Yeah.
First of all, I'm just in such admiration and inspiration from like what I've heard earlier, and I think about the role of philanthropy as an arena of power within which we have to organize in support of establishing the financial infrastructure, the innovative new models of business, and never say no, and how you actually manifest that in a community. So Sarah Christiansen and I lead the climate program at McKnight Foundation. We're a 70-year family foundation rooted in Minnesota, and our climate program covers the upper Midwest states. And in case you don't have a sense of where the upper Midwest sits within the global climate, we are literally the 6th largest emitting region in the world. And it is the heartland of how working families really found a way within which to make a living and to have good jobs, and that's not currently the reality that we live in today. And so how I also think about it is what you were saying, Helen, like I feel like our team and what we do aspire to really center communities and community development. And we think of our role within philanthropy as how we be accountable to the positional power that we have. Philanthropy typically gives grants, and we've been talking a long time, and there are folks in this room who have really worked on what does it mean to not just give grants, but think about how we sit on an asset base. And as our amazing president, Tanya Allen, will say, if 95% of our money is actually in contraindication to what we're doing with our grant making, we've lost before we get a grant out the door. So because of that, we've really embraced over the last couple of years, what does it mean for us to be all in? And so we mentioned program-related investments. That's something we've been doing for over a decade, and some, that's really positive, great work. But we've also committed to being a net zero endowment. We're sort of the largest funder to step into that space. Net zero can mean something or nothing. And so what I would say is we see the highest expression of our mission is at the nexus of climate and racial and economic justice. And so our climate program can't succeed unless it's centered in the communities and in the justice frame. So out of that, we've actually spent a chunk of time really looking at what does it mean for us to use that, that capital, how do we deploy it? And so that shows up in programs that we were just in a board meeting last week, and I got permission to say I could talk about it, which is it's not enough just to give a loan through a program-related investment. We actually went to the entity we were working with that it is a model of how do you build cooperative ownership so that when you deploy levels of megawatt solar that's actually owned by the communities who are there, it's not just like, okay, we're going to give you a loan on your terms. We said, what kind of capital do you need? And I think that's the breadth of tools that we have to be thinking about. Another example for us is that in the wake of George Floyd's murder and the racial uprising, over 600 businesses and homes were damaged in Minneapolis. And it was a real reckoning with the community to understand what does it mean to be a community developer in this moment. And so Tanya, with her vision, really convened what's called the Groundbreak Coalition. And it goes further upstream in the financial investment with what happens with capital and how it flows. So that's convening bankers, investors, folks who are at the community table to commit to what is now $1 billion to talk about how we do different types of investment that address affordable housing, entrepreneurialism, commercial development in Black communities, like with specific targets that recognize how Black communities have been hurt. And so what that means on a practical level is lots of banks we have so many financial products out there that try to target communities, but it's really saying, can we just acknowledge that the rules are written in an inequitable way, and how can we talk about what it means to rewrite the rules? You can offer a loan, but if you can't afford if you don't have that gap finance to even get the loan, then it's not useful. So I think we're also leaning into how Groundbreak Coalition, which has targeted, like I said, 11,000 homeowners, but also saying, what does it mean for us to not also support you getting into a home to build wealth, but that home is actually decarbonized so that it's air that's clean that you breathe, your energy burden is lower, and you're actually in a place where you can advance your wealth over time. So that's another very specific way, which is like going upstream with the positional power that we hold. The other thing I would say too is, lights are so bright, but I have another amazing team member here, Sasha Rose Phillips, and I can't, even though she's wearing an awesome pink shirt, I can't see her. There she is. So Sasha Rose on our team also leaned into this federal moment by saying, like, all those programs you heard about today, like, what is the landscape? How do we understand it? How do we actually support and convene and bring together community-based organizations, people who are technical assistance providers, to understand what's that landscape so we can start unpacking the confusion and understand what are the revenue flows. So I would also name that there's capital, that we are trying to use all of the tools within our capital toolbox, but then it's also what is our role within our community to bring folks together and to have that convening power that when you are a place-based foundation, you play an outsized role. And so how do we actually step up to that role? I'll pause there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm gonna actually, because y'all went quick. So we have a little extra time, and I was asking, like, do we have time for some questions? But I'm actually gonna mix it up a little bit and see if anyone on the panel has a question for one of the other panelists. Go ahead, Bracken.
I just want to jump in, Rahwa. When you've actually done the work of building projects and putting together financial models and finding partners and like actually doing the careful layering that the IRA is now asking us for. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to hear the things you're most excited about in this moment to put to work and the places where you've really run into roadblocks that were very hard to overcome.
Yeah, I'll start with the roadblocks because I think that's probably what communities want to hear the most, and how do we remove them, is that if you're going to be giving PRIs, you also need to give an actual grant with it, because you need the developer, the pre-development dollars. Those are really, really hard to raise if you haven't done them. And those are always challenging for us because we're not trying to make revenue. So we always give up our developer fee in order to have the best material for our housing, because we're trying to meet the 100-year mark as well when we build affordable housing for our people, right? And so we just have to give that up. And so we're always raising pre-development dollars, as we're also building new development projects, right? And so that is a really hard thing. Other kinds of things are give the organizations money, let it build interest, but give them more time. And do not penalize them if they make mistakes, because that's how they learn quicker. Many of these things have not been done. Like I said, we're not just trying to develop housing. We build housing. We build renewable energy projects. We have a weatherization program that's for all LMI folks in 5 counties, reducing energy burdens. We are trying to be the first ones that had the 100% of community solar in the state of New York once we won that policy. We are now doing, community. So we are going to make mistakes. Like, we are always going to be ahead of the curve. I told you we built our first net zero house in 2010. As a rehab with youth build. and of course we're training them how to do it, right? And so that's the kind of practice of community so that we can go to the kind of scale. But then we went from building, literally we started with doing 2 units, 5 units, 11 units, 18 units, 46 units. We had to do that as a collaboration on Light Tech because we've never done Light Tech before, right? And we were in a forced marriage, no problem. Then we did 30 units on our own, and it was the greenest project we'd done, right? And now we're thinking, great, we're never gonna build fossil fuel housing moving forward, but we're gonna go backwards and defossilize all of our housing. And we've already started doing that. So scale isn't linear. It's scale this way, it's scale this way, it's scale this way, right? So those are the things that we can teach other people, but you need to give us the time and space and the resources to begin to think that way. And every community is different. All of our housing is a snowflake. Every community is different. So you have to think about thinking about climate change and resiliency. What we do in Buffalo may not work for somebody in California, may not work for somebody in Miami, right? But they're learning, give them time to learn and bake and what have you, and they're gonna come up with the best solutions, right? So I think those are the things that we can, that's the kind of TA that we can give. The other kinds of things are, loans are great, impact investing is great, right? But that is not the place to start. The place to start is because the money's been extracted for generations, you have to put some money back first. And I'll give you one perfect example, I'm gonna shut up. So we were trying to raise $5 million for land acquisition because land is becoming impossible in our community and it's costing us a lot more money than it did 15 years ago. And so we tried to raise $5 million of PRI in dollars. We were able to raise $1 million because the Green Bank, we were too small for them. I'm like, well, you can't go from 0 to 60 in community. So y'all make smaller loans available to communities and a timeline that works for them. And so when we got the $1 million, though, it was like 2%, whatever money funds we drew is the interest we paid, and we had a decade to pay it. And guess what? We paid it in 5 years. Yeah. 5 years. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But so people don't think that communities have capacity. We do. We just need to be given the time that we need to build the expertise like locally in our communities with partners.
So, go ahead, Sarah.
I would love to follow up on that and ask this question because I think one of the things that we've been aware of in some of the investments that we've been doing, as well as something like the Groundbreak Coalition, is we have sort of a mega history of identifying what risk is, and that perceived risk is actually a part of structurally racist policies that come from the history. And I think I will actually just take a personal moment because I really appreciated this morning the grounding that we had. Yes. And I called to mind my grandmother. And my grandmother, her husband, my grandfather, built a house in Minneapolis that was a part of a series of houses. It was built in 1926 that had a covenant that you could not sell that house to a person of color, to a black person. And so, like, the reckoning that we've had within how those things show, I just need to name that because I feel like I bring that into the room and thinking about what does it mean in this new moment to dismantle things. And those things sometimes are explicit and even written down. And then what it is now in the current moment, particularly from an investment place. So I'd love to also hear about like how you bumped up against perceived risk that shows up in today's current investment climate and how you, as you've proven, dismantle that perception.
That's a really good question. I think it's ongoing. I don't think it's ever done. I think we still bump up into that, even with the fact that we actually have an incredible amount of assets now. And part of that is the way finance work is that they're just always, they see everything as risky, including philanthropy for the most part, right? But I think the other piece about it too is like the perception of power. And so we talk a lot about power. We are not afraid to take power and wield it. And we don't have, listen, I come from nothing. But when you bring 400 to 500 people in a room, they're gonna listen to you. There is real power in real people, right? But I think if push is a demonstration, that's why we have thousands of people that come to try to let them know, if you trust the people, they become trustworthy. Like we did it with nothing. And using really crazy, we were organizers. So we organized, we wrote the policies that worked for our community. And the minute the policy became real, we knew how to draw those funds down, right? And then we just kept it's a virtuous circle. And we kept writing more policy, you know what I mean? More organizing, more policy, draw down the money. Like, for example, for CLCPA, it didn't pass until 2019. We started imagining the West Side Homes project, the one that I just told you about, in 2018, right? And then by the time the law passed, we didn't know it was gonna pass in 2019, but we told our community, imagine this already passed, what are we gonna build? It already passed, right? And so that's the mindset shift. And that's what we're trying to show. We're trying to demonstrate that we in community can be bold enough and actually reimagine and like shift the way the systems work and unlock it. But then we want y'all, the impact investors, the financiers, government, philanthropy, to then see that and say, what if we were the ones to remove those barriers? Because let's be honest, you're the ones that created those barriers, right? Let's remove them for other communities and then see what happens.
Can I jump in?
Yeah. We got 7 minutes. Jump.
Perfect. I want to go back to the original thing that I said about sitting with anxiety and the notion that there's tension here. We're at a moment where everybody has a piece of the puzzle, but nobody has the whole picture. So we need tables where people are outside their comfort zone. And that is critically important to getting these solutions to actually work. And so one of the things we're trying to do with Working Power inside our financial model is to honor the real assets that are brought by communities that are traditionally not monetized or given sanction or standing legally, but also to understand the pressures that investment partners are under. Because underwriting, like real underwriting risk and the threat of non-repayment, if you've built a structure that's predicated on repayment, is a problem to the deal. It does create risk. If you're trying to come in with equity, you really need to think about what is a fair return on that equity. Is it what private equity can get in a standard deal today? Or might there be something that is a really nice return for a PRI or some other mission-related investor, but it's squeezing out 5–10% out of the capital stack that can go right back to the community member. So, we need to both move at the speed of trust and not rush partners, but also recognize where we can go fast and achieve scale and do authentic underwriting. Clearly, perceptual risk that low-income communities don't pay their bills is just building in a whole layer of structural barrier and unexamined prejudice into the financial model. And you can also say, well, if there are repayment risks, what can we do with credit enhancements, with backstop guarantees using the balance sheet of my foundation? How can I have a whole suite of tools? These are communities that have been extracted, as you said so well. We need some capital to go back in. Could you use your grant money to flow in as community equity grants to vest ownership with nonprofit partners so they get the money back and then they get a return on it as if they were equity investors? Why not? So we need to be impatient enough to make sure that the people who've taken a risk with federal policy have answers when they need to start going in front of congressional hearings that are structured to embarrass and disempower. They need answers. They really need projects. We need pipeline. But that pipeline can't be at the expense of direct ownership, of true vesting of community power. And that's just a tension we're going to have to sit with. And I think the real answer there is to know what problem we're trying to solve, because there is money to solve equity issues, risk issues, credit issues. Grants can be useful, and capital investment that requires a return. And ultimately, we're not going to scale unless we transform the capital market. And that's what we can learn from LIHTC and these other things that, at the end of the day, the big money center banks are going to come around because they'll be excited because it's a multi-billion-dollar market. But it's only going to happen if we build it first without a lot of help.
Thank you so much. So I want to thank our panel and then sort of bring it home where these pieces come together. We were excited to be able to bring folks together because we wanted to talk about what the possibilities are, but we also wanted to talk about what was necessary within the ecosystem that we were attempting to build. So many people may be coming at this in different ways, whether it's the I am in this room because I am a driver for the clean economy, whether it is the I am here for workforce, I am here for community wealth, or I'm here just to drive the economy. Like, let's be real about this, right? If we are going to fulfill on the proposition around being able to bring forward a new value set that is different from the last one that we had when we had this level of investment. So we had Wally talk about the last time we had this level of investment was during the highway system. I want us to sit in, as Sarah was talking about, our values were centered around a segregated nation. That is not where we are today. We are a nation that is committed to be building a multicultural democracy. And in order for that to happen, we are going to have to dismantle systems. The thing that this government has given us in an unprecedented way is the space and the resources to do that. So we're going to have to be courageous about that. And the folks that are, because one of the intentions was like the folks that are going to get some of these greenhouse gas reduction funds, you have to be comfortable, and if you're not comfortable, know we will be organizing to get you comfortable in dismantling the systems that actually are rooted, again, in a time when we were a segregated nation, and it was okay to have casualties along the lines of race and class. That's not going to play anymore. Okay. So what does it mean to step into this moment? It means reimagining what risk is, reimagining what this money is. We are being given a windfall of resources. So I'm just going to talk about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Remember, your mandate is, at bare minimum, 40% with the infrastructure bank has to go to, I don't work for the administration, so I'm just going to say it plain, Black and brown communities who have had to bear the burden of our development for centuries. That's what that money is for. We want to say disadvantaged communities, low wealth communities, we know what it is. And then the other pockets of money, 100% of that money has to go back to these communities. So do not sit in the I can't, because the system is this way. You are given space right now, remember, to be creative and reimagine something different. And I want to thank this panel so much because you are a snapshot, a pilot of what is possible. You have to hold risk differently. You have to center community differently. And if not, the interesting thing is, don't forget, there's a mandate. So you can go play with this money. We collectively, the power building and the movement that's happening is going to hold you accountable, but the feds are also going to hold you accountable on how you are delivering on that. So I just want you guys to sit in that because that is where the opportunity is. So again, I want to thank our panel so much. And I had talking points, but I totally forgot them. Because I see that there's such a real opportunity. And the other thing is we will have an opportunity later to really think through, like, what does it look like to braid this capital? We have so much discretionary money in that we can actually, if we are thoughtful, I'm going to use Shiva's word, intentional around braiding this money so we can have the foundation for a community to be able to have some of that risky dollars with grant-making dollars. So whether that is the community change, whether it is a grant-making program, whether it is at the LEAP program, that is the space for people to be able to think about risk in a different way and then be able to braid that with the larger breadth of resources that are coming from IRA and even the build money still in order to give communities the space to be whole with the capital that's necessary for them to ideate on their vision. So with that, at exactly 0 minutes left, I want to thank our panel, and we're excited to those small breakout tables because we don't have time for questions, but that will be the space to roll up our sleeves and think about how are we in relationship to be able to build this. So thank you so much.
Thank
y'all? Okay.